Hi, my name is Joseph Presley. I'm the sculpture teacher here at Carver Center, and I'm going to talk about the sculpture option on the magnet assessment for visual arts at Carver Center. I'm going to read what it says real quick in the directions, just so we're all on the same page. This is for the D, pick what you like, based on what you enjoy, complete one of the following 4 works. Well, one of the options is a sculpture, and it says, make a single sculpture of a fruit and a vegetable in as much detail as possible. Consider cutting, breaking, or biting them. Consider how you arrange them together. Make the sculpture out of anything you have access to. Clay, paper mache, cardboard, wire, found object, whatever you got. I would encourage you to, if you want to do a sculpture, to do the sculpture out of whatever material you're most comfortable working in. Whatever you think is going to make the best result. The sculpture should be at least 8 inches in its largest dimension, length, width, or height. In other words, however big it is, the biggest part needs to be 8 inches. Scoring will consider detail, craftsmanship, aesthetics, and conceptual content. So we're going to talk about how much detail you get in there. So like I've got a couple of pieces of fruit and vegetables here, right? So like, do we have all the different stems in there, and all of the texture on this part's different than the texture on that part? We got those little ridges there where leaves to be of the broccoli. Do we got all the different folds and bumps and lumps and twists and dips in a pepper? Things like that. Craftsmanship. Think about how you're using the material. If let's say you're building out of cardboard and hot glue, let's say, right? How much of the hot glue do we see? Hopefully not very much, right? We don't want to see the adhesive or the tape or whatever. We just want to see the material itself. In this case, let's say cardboard or whatever you're working in. Aesthetics, how do you arrange it? How does it look, right? Were you able to make this thing look cool? And conceptual content is entirely optional. But maybe maybe you're telling some fun sort of story with it. We can look how you arrange it. Maybe there's other things going on, but that's not a huge deal. We want you to submit 4 pics of your sculpture from 4 different angles, right? So if I arrange this thing here, it looks one way from one view and another way from another view and another way, because it's sculpture. We've got to see different angles to really understand the whole thing, right? So pick the views that you send us wisely. Make sure you're sending us 4 views that tell us about the whole thing. Don't send, one view here and one view here and one view here and one view here, because that it only tells us about this much of the sculpture. Give us 4 different views. And think about, make sure you get shots of whatever you think the coolest parts of it are. It also says, please have a clean background and good lighting, right? So don't just set this on your kitchen counter with all the kitchen stuff going on in the background. Set it maybe up against a table, against a on a table against a blank wall somewhere, right? So there's nothing else going on in the environment. And then think about the lighting. How does the lighting look? Are you right next to a window or a bright lamp and the lighting is like super harsh? That's probably not a great idea for a sculpture. We want lighting that's a little more even, that lets us understand the depth and form of all of the objects, right? So take a good picture of your sculpture. So since you can do this in any medium, right? I'm not going to talk about the materials because I don't know what material you're going to use. But really anything you think you can make representational form out of, go nuts. I'm going to talk about how you're setting this up though. So I got 2 vegetables and 2 pieces of fruit. It says, a single sculpture of a fruit and a vegetable, right? So you could just do the banana and the broccoli. You want to throw in an extra piece of fruit, that's fine. It's all good, whatever you need to do. There's no limit on the number of things you can have. I think we're basically requiring you to have at least 2 things. But consider how you're arranging them, right? Just having them next to each other is maybe not as interesting as if, we had them interacting a little more, right? Right? And if I do this, they're kind of perpendicular, right? They make it like a right angle. Maybe not as interesting as if they created like some diagonals, right? Diagonals usually make a more interesting composition. The banana, by itself it's okay, but what if you peeled it? Suddenly there's like this curvy part, there's a different texture now. Maybe I can peel this one like a little further, right? And now I've got 2 different levels. Suddenly there's a lot more happening in my banana than there was before, right? You know, you could also, like, oh, how many pieces of broccoli can I have? Well, as many as you think you need. We can cut the broccoli up into 2 pieces if you want. Look at now, we have a nice flat, sharp surface there, right? It's kind of contrasting to the roundness we have over here. So that might be kind of interesting, right? We can create some flat surfaces there. One thing, you know, you could also do, right, to make, this is just basically close enough to a sphere, right? It's not terribly interesting, but if we take some bites out of it, suddenly the shape, right, from different views, has a lot more going on. There's also a whole other texture in here now that wasn't on the outside, right? So that could be more interesting. We got this green pepper, right? And there's some cool like dips and lumps, and it's not the same on every side, which is kind of cool. But when I open it up, suddenly there's all these seeds in there and all these other different shapes and textures you could get into. You know, depending on your medium, you may be able to get that kind of detail. And maybe you mix mediums. Maybe you're making out of cardboard, but you're like, oh, the cardboard, I can't get the seeds in the cardboard. Okay, maybe I use like little pieces of paper or something and stuck those on there to make the seeds. Cool, man. It's all good. You're allowed to mix the mediums if you feel like you need to get the details you want to get. That's fine. Do your composing with the actual food, right? Then, when you're sculpting, just try to get as much detail as you can in the medium that you're using. One other note about doing representational sculpture. So let's say this is my composition. I'm gonna throw this dude in here just for the fun of it, right? Make sure you're looking at this from different angles, right? And I'm working on the sculpture from the same angle. I turn this, I turn my sculpture. So now I'm comparing apples to apples, no pun intended, right? Turn the sculpture again so I have the same view. Do that, you should have a pretty successful sculpture. Remember, you also don't have to do a sculpture. You can pick any one of those 4 things, a sculpture, a film, a photograph, or a digital piece. This is just the directions for the sculpture option. I hope you give it a try. I hope you have a good time doing it. I look forward to seeing your work.